Thank you for coming to our modest facility. Um, I was asked to speak about a topic which, as you know, has been a big part of my career for the past couple of decades, and that's the South China Sea and West Philippine Sea within it. And what I want to focus on today is, along the themes of the conference, the looming environmental crisis in the South China Sea and the West Philippine Sea. Now, to recall and summarize a 500-page award into just one slide so that we can have a clear idea of what we need to keep in mind. The arbitration award, all 501 pages of it, basically emphasizes just a few major points from which all other conclusions are drawn. First, China does not have a valid historic claim to the area of the entire 9-dash line. That's why it's no longer there on that drawing. It may only make claims in accordance with UNCLOS, which at maximum, meaning even if you consider the paracels to generate an exclusive economic zone, even if you consider Taiwan as part of China, would be that yellow dotted line at maximum. And that's best case scenario for them. Worst case scenario, if only the main coastline will generate it, it will be that those red dotted lines there. Now, second point, the islands and rocks in the South China Sea do not generate their own exclusive economic zone in continental shelf. They can only generate a 12 nautical mile territorial sea, and perhaps they can declare 24 nautical mile contiguous zones around it. But what matters really is that when you talk about the disputed area in the South China Sea, as far as the Philippines should be concerned, it's only those yellow dots, not the entire 9-dash line area. Any opinion to the contrary essentially would be setting aside the victory in the arbitration decision. Now, third point, because those islands and rocks do not generate exclusive economic zone continental shelf, the Philippines is entitled to the maximum of the 200 nautical miles. Okay? That green line over there, subject to negotiation of a maritime boundary, the northern portion perhaps, but the rest is unimpeded, unaffected by those islands and rocks. You could say that those islands and rocks, those yellow dots, are the only disputed areas. They're like holes in essentially undisputed Philippine exclusive economic zone and continental shelf or high seas areas. Proceeding from that, since we're entitled to the fully EEZ continental shelf, we may even claim an extended continental shelf in that area, which will encompass the seabed areas around the Kalayaan Island group. But we have not made that claim despite our recommendations. And only the sovereignty over those islands and rocks now remain legitimately disputed. The waters are outside of 12 nautical miles around those islands and rocks have been clearly allocated already in the arbitral award. And because the zones, the entitlements are clear, the tribunal was therefore able to determine whether China's actions against the Philippines in various locations in those areas were contrary to international law. And as you know, for the most part, they did. It is with respect to those activities that we're now focusing on, particularly those related to the marine environment. Now, when you look at it, this arbitral award provides for certain basic marine environmental imperatives for us to pursue. And we're not even talking about the enforcement and implementation of the award at this point. We're talking about just some basic things that we should move for in order to ensure that any future action to implement the award would be effective, would actually be worth pursuing. These basic things with respect to the marine environment are to protect the integrity and productive capacity of that environment, particularly in our part of the West Philippine Sea, the West Philippine Sea being our part of the South China Sea. Second, get other countries to cooperate with the conservation or mitigation measures to be implemented in this area, because that will benefit not only us, but everyone else. And third, most important and probably most concrete, is to eliminate destructive fishing activities, particularly what has been highlighted in the past couple of months, the giant clam harvesting that has been taking place. There are other activities such as taking of marine mammals, taking of sharks and rays, etc. But that is probably the most vivid example we could think of because it happens to be also the most destructive activity taking place right now in that area. The need, sorry, wait. The need to do this is very clear because the marine environment in the entire South China Sea, not just the West Philippine Sea, has already exhibited serious signs of degradation. No? With respect to fish stocks, they have been reduced to less than 10% of what they were in just a few decades ago. No? The coral reef degrades at a rate of about 16% per decade. And major large species, large predator species, the species on the higher end of the food chain have begun to disappear. No? So over 100% over 8 years. In the case of certain species, they have disappeared. The catch rates have fallen, and habitat destruction has increased overall. Next slide, please. In terms of fisheries that have been identified, this is from the sea around this project, you see there in red the increase of collapsed fish stocks and a higher and higher rate of overexploitation and exploitation. And the green area there, light green, developing fisheries have been shrinking dramatically over the past couple of decades. Now, next slide. This is cumulative data of exploitation in the South China Sea, and you see there in colors the various types of species. What is important to recognize is, number one, the brown area, which are classified as others. Those are actually the lesser valued species. The most valuable ones are the blue ones down there. And you see that they plateaued and started declining already. This, also notice the trend overall of increase, and then it plateaus. This is very troublesome. This is very troubling because it reflects similar trends of fisheries collapses observed elsewhere in the world. For example, the famous collapse of the Atlantic cod fish stocks in the Atlantic. Okay. So you see, wait. So you see the increasing trend, and it plateaued, and then there was a sudden increase in exploitation, suddenly slam, no? Fell down, almost to zero. Absolute collapse, 1990s. Okay. And this has been a very traumatic experience for these countries. This also informed, marked a sea change in the attitudes globally about management of fish stocks. That's why subsequently you had the negotiation and ratification of the United Nations Fish Stocks Agreement. Okay, next slide. There are various indicators. Now these are like alarms already sounding in the South China Sea. The one on the left, despite the increase in catch, the value has been getting lower. That means you're fishing less and less valuable fish. The marine trophic index is basically the level in the food chain, the marine food chain. We're fishing down the food chain, catching smaller, less valuable species that we didn't used to eat a lot of, we're eating more of it. And on the right side, the decline in catch per unit effort, meaning it's getting harder and harder to fish. These signs are scattered all over the South China Sea, not just the West Philippine Sea, of which it is a part. Okay, next. Last week you saw, this series of graphs in the major dailies and also a video that was posted now, which shows you the intrusions into the Philippine EEZ, the West Philippine Sea, since 2012, every April of every year since 2012. And you see the movement of these intrusions into the West Philippine Sea since that time. Next slide. This is another version of that, but we're looking at only the past year. So it's from June 2018. Click to animate. And you see very visually the movement of foreign fishing vessels into the Philippine EEZ. And it is massive. You see the West Philippine Sea outlined in red. And then you consider that as well in the context of the entire South China Sea. And you can see why there is a sense of urgency in the need to address these environmental crises. Okay, next slide. Now, some focal points. Scarborough Shoal, one of our main concerns because it is a disputed area. Scarborough Shoal, as of 2016, sustained 550 hectares of damage out of 3,500 hectares of what is that part known as the back reef. From pristine reef on the left, converted to a desolate pile on the right. 550 hectares as of 2016. And it continued since that time. Next slide. Actually, the government has been receiving reports of this every year since 2016, and that's why I'm getting so emotional about this. It was well known. As early as November 2016, after the fishing was allowed outside the shoal, it was reported. It was reported again the following year, the following fishing season in April 17, 11, 17, 24. Repeated again, August 15, reported to be far. Again in 2018, February, it was already noticed by the armed forces through the Northern Luzon Command. It was reported massive destruction going on in Scarborough Shoal. Again repeated the following year, March. And that was all before the news came out about China Coast Guard fishermen taking fish. And then again this year, repeatedly, January 28 to February, are moving out. So I'm getting angry, sorry, while this crisis is going on. Next slide, please. And government has been completely aware of it. It's not a complete shutdown. At least some departments have expressed their concerns about these trends. Particularly, I cite a report of the DNR to the National Security Advisor made just last March. Quoted here, this was among the documents that was submitted to the Supreme Court in the return to the writ of kalikasan. And very clear there is the assessment of DNR that the continued coral destruction in harvesting giant clams, sea turtles, puff shells, and other protected endangered species in Scarborough Shoal, all of them observed, all of them based on actual reports within government. Compounded by China's inaction to address this situation, this is tantamount to blatant disregard for international law, particularly the duty to protect and preserve the marine environment set forth in UNCLOS. And further on, later on goes, this continued destruction, not only does it violate UNCLOS, it also violates several other conventions, such as CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, and the Convention on Biodiversity, CBD. So we're no longer talking only about UNCLOS, we're talking about CBD and CITES as well. And these have been taking place while we're supposedly negotiating maritime cooperation, environmental protection, etc. Next slide. This one we're still waiting on, the recommendation that was made in that same report. The National Task Force West Philippine Sea agreed to create a team to explore and study all possible legal actions against China. And this was actually tweeted by Secretary Locsin around that time. And there's supposed to be a legal team. That is March. What has happened since then? What has happened since then? I think the Filipino people want to know because there are legal options available. Ourselves, we just took a quick scan. There are several options under UNCLOS, several options under CITES and CBD, and there are additional options under the International Program of Action Against IUU Fishing. Where are these legal actions? That's what we want to know. Next slide. Because there is no reason not to take any of these options since in 2017, ASEAN and China even made a big show of coming up with this document declaring a decade for the protection of the coastal and marine environment in the South China Sea. 2017. And while they're signing this, they continued to scour Scarborough Shoal. And who knows what other reefs in Calayan Island Group. That's why I'm like this recently. This has to stop. And we have to get serious. And we're not talking about going to war, we're talking about simple things like stopping the destruction of a common pool resource that would benefit us all. That is the problem. That is the crisis we want to address.
And if we can start it in the West Philippine Sea, it's all better for us, all the better for us. But it's not just us, it's the entire region that benefits.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.